I'm Susie Hess.
And I'm Yehuda Price. This is Our Stories Matter.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I want to introduce Bryonn Bain and Claudia Peña, those who are currently incarcerated with post-secondary education through UCLA's prison education program. The program provides a shared collaborative space between students and experienced faculty in an effort to challenge discrimination, bias, and injustice. Bryonn is not only the director of the program, but is also an associate professor in the university's Department of African American Studies and the Department of World Arts and Culture's Dance. As activist and artist, his background in spoken word, hip hop, theater, and film have been central to his work in prisons for over 3 decades. He's written numerous books, including The Ugly Side of Beautiful, and is known for the one-man show Lyrica from Lockdown. Claudia is the prison education program's faculty in residence. She is also the executive director of Four Freedoms, a national arts organization that serves a platform for artists to model and inspire civic engagement. She's on faculty at UCLA's Law School and in Gender Studies, and is a practitioner of transformative justice. Their shared research and expertise in human rights, mass decarceration, critical race studies, transformative justice, trauma, healing, and resilience-informed loitering, among other social justice methods, also inform their work with the program. The accolades go on about these two, but they can speak for themselves on that. So welcome.
Peace, and blessings, family.
Thank you so much for having us, y'all.
We're so excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here.
Let's kick it off. I mean, just reading, about you and understanding about you, there's so many questions I want to ask, so I just want to jump right into it. And this is for whoever feels like answering first. Is what is collaboration and why does it matter?
Did you just point at me, Bryonn? Because I was about to point at you.
You gotta be quicker on the draw. Brooklyn all day. Come with it quick.
Collaboration, for me, collaboration basically is just another word for community. Doing something together and, working towards some sort of shared idea of what the world should look like. It's really simple, but what's interesting about collaboration, about the word, is that you would think the antonym is something like individual or single, but really the opposite of collaboration is disunity or division or like breaking up, some sort of separation or estrangement. So collaboration really is like togetherness, right? That's why I think it's community. Well said.
So well said. I like that. Community, finding ways to make the sum of your work greater than your individual parts. The old African proverb, we are and so I am, really my family's motto, and the South African parlance, Ubuntu, the idea that like everybody, we're just so much more powerful, as a unit working together in collaboration. So I also think, words that are related to it, like conspire, are sometimes stigmatized, when in fact their roots really mean to breathe together, and to embrace this idea that, we actually are all connected in more ways than we realize. And I think as our consciousness expands, to embrace the idea that we are all one organism, right? The idea, this Buddhist idea that our separation is an illusion and our connectedness is actually the reality. And I think collaboration is just an acknowledgement of that and a recognition of that in all the work we do together.
Whoa. Yeah, 100%. And, that's a lot about why we wanted to do Our Stories Matter, is to bring healing to the forefront. And that healing is really hard without having it be within the community, right? That it's not just about the individual. And, I so appreciate what you said. And I'm wondering, since we're all, we're all over the place, actually. I'm in Indiana. Claudia and Yehuda are in SoCal.
I'm in New York.
Yeah, I am. I happen to be in Brooklyn right now.
Oh, and Bryonn, where are you right now?
I'm in New York. Right now myself. So yeah, but I'll be back in LA in a week or two. But I'm on the East right now.
So New York, Indiana, LA in the house, and for me, I came out here to see my family because I haven't seen them since 2019, before the pandemic, and I'm wondering, what has the pandemic been like for both of you to radically imagine just healing in ways that you haven't before?
Well, I have to reach into the sister who, you know, if anybody is my scholarly crush, it's Arundhati Roy. And she said, you know, the pandemic is a portal, you know. We ain't trying to get back to normal because normal wasn't that good for a lot of us, you know. So a lot of us was angry before this thing started. We was pissed off and angry at the injustice and inequities before the pandemic started. The pandemic only just deepened how much, you know, Black and working class and queer and trans folks were already suffering. But it's just got to be a portal to something that's better than where we were before. And so in some ways, you know, I've been able to see some of that happen. It's been a lot of, you know, a lot of pain, a lot of loss of life. You know, folks told people my family had COVID. I had COVID, you know. So, but at the same time, we've seen some amazing opportunities, you know, to really double down and push to have folks released from prison. You know, as we saw, like the suffering of folks who were incarcerated could not socially distance or physically distance because they're incarcerated in the incarceration capital of the world. You know, the push from the general public to be more humane, you know, which we've been ringing the alarm on for a long time, for decades. You know, actually more folks became attuned to that. I think more folks became attuned to the racial injustice around police violence and having little to do but watch these videos over and over and over again of, you know, violence being done by the state against working and poor and people of color. I think that in some ways triggered the mass movements of folks into the streets, 350 cities around the country, around the world, standing up against, you know, standing up for in the defense of Black lives, right? And so I think some of that is what's happened specifically in our work. You know, we've been able to begin developing new ways to actually bring the resources of higher education institutions and the arts to folks who are incarcerated, you know. And so some of the video platforms, online platforms that, you know, we're seen as sort of like the second class way to go about education. Once everybody was doing it, it forced us to begin innovating. And now this year alone, we proposed a new bachelor's degree from UCLA for incarcerated students, right? From the number one public institution in the country, the institution gets more applications to it every year than any other institution in the world. We are now, you know, 8-9 letters of support deep and approaching the chancellor very soon about having UCLA's degrees be offered to incarcerated folks at Victorville Federal Prison, you know. So those are some of the things we've been innovating, working, and building on. And, you know, the pandemic is really an opportunity for our story of turning lemons into lemonade to be seen, you know, in a new moment, in a different light.
All of that and then some. One of the things that it helped me imagine differently is just disability justice, because a lot of folks in the disability justice community have been talking about pushing for, advocating for, demanding that the world be more accessible, and, you know, ideas of universal design be implemented in all of the things that we do, including programming and education and anything that has to do with community. And I think the pandemic has forced everybody to think about that more deeply. So that's been fun to think about and imagine differently. And the other thing is intimacy. I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to imagine that differently. There's an event that I host every year called Dearly Departed, where we get together to honor people who have passed on. And it's always an in-person event with food. It requires, you know, physical closeness between all of us who are being vulnerable enough to share about people who have passed on. And the pandemic forced us to do it virtually, and I thought it was going to be stupid. I didn't think it was going to be any good online together in a Zoom room. And it turned out to be the best one we've had, because for some reason, people who were usually unwilling to speak or share felt comfortable enough to do it. Maybe it's something about being in their own home in their pajamas while they're on the screen together. Or maybe it's something about seeing everybody on the screen at once. I don't know what it was, but it allowed for an even deeper intimacy than I could have imagined before. So there's, you know, ways in which I used to think that I thought were like, that's it. That's the way it must be. We must be in a room together, sharing energetic space. And now there's new ideas about how to connect deeply.
Yeah, I mean, that whole thing, that quest of intimacy and us finding new innovative ways that we never even imagined before. And not only that, knowing that how important this intimacy and these connections are, we kind of taken for granted, but being able to come up with these new ways, it has been trying at times, but it shows, you know, what humans are capable of. So Definitely digging that perspective. I want to circle back to what Bryonn was speaking about. So when I was incarcerated, we didn't really have any options for, bachelor's degrees. So we get the associate's degree, and then you might get like 3 or 4 associate degrees because that was it. I ended up doing Adams State University, which I was buying one class at a time here and there because of the cost was so, prohibitive. I had to, I can't get a package or food and just tell my family, can everybody just piece together so I can get like one class, right? So when you talk about UCLA offering degrees, to me, that just, I get this, this sensation inside me, like, wow, like, because I know how impactful that is to so many people who are like, they just hit a wall. You're in prison, you're trying to do so much with your life. And, education is a pathway towards some sort of equity, some sort of, furtherance of, your dreams or attainment of dreams you never knew possible before. So just to know that that's now available and through a top university like UCLA, if you could, tell us any more about that particular program.
Yeah, so we've been working on it for some time, and we are, we feel like we're in the home stretch of making it official. But the prison education program, actually, we launched in 2015. We actually had our very first focus group at the oldest prison for women in the state of California, CIW prison. And literally what you just said, we had about a dozen women in the room. There were women with 5, 6 associate's degrees because they could not have access. They had no access to anything beyond Chaffey Community College, a couple other community college programs, correspondence programs, some programs that were, they themselves talked about it being anywhere from ineffective to exploitative. The research shows that as well. And so we started our first pilot course back then, 2016, the following spring. 139 women wrote letters after that first focus group and said, please offer us bachelor's degrees here because, we have reached a limit. And so there was a huge demand. And so we've been offering 1 or 2 courses every quarter since then. And we expanded from the women's facility to juvenile hall, to a juvenile camp, Barry J. Nidoff Juvenile Hall in Sylmar, Camp Scott for girls. So we've done maybe half a dozen different facilities. And just this year, with the Pell Grants coming back, at the federal level, Clinton cut them out back in the 90s with the omnibus crime bill, as a way to show he could be tough on crime. And, ended up being responsible for more black people of color being locked up than Bush before or after him, So to finally get Pell Grants back, Obama started the sort of Second Chance Pell pilot program, and now to have Pell Grants fully return, it's definitely been a spark. When we walked into the federal facility, Victorville Federal Facility, which has both men and women, last month and did the focus group there, I mean, it was unlike I've done prison work in about 25 states around the country, and only locked up more than once, but never for any period of time as long as my mentor Eddie Ellis, who did 25 years, or my brother who did half a decade. But I've been in prisons for the last 30 years, in half the states around the country, and I had never experienced a welcome like we received from the women and the folks in the facility, because federal facilities have been all but forgotten about when it comes to these kind of education programs, because when they cut the Pell Grants, it devastated folks. Folks, like you said, that had little or no access to any education. So I feel like we're in a moment right now. There's a sea change moment where there's an opportunity to really, as people are looking for ways to reimagine justice and reimagine racial justice and how we think about race and class and equity in this country. We have a moment to really, kind of undo some of the devastating damage that the last 40 years of the prison industrial complex being built up, with the drug war has done. And so at UCLA, I came to UCLA after starting programs at Rikers Island, through Columbia and NYU, working at Sing Sing's prison program, a prison called Walk Hill in upstate New York. And so those programs really inspired by women who, at a facility called Bedford Hills, really after Pell Grants were cut, it was women that kind of organized to get university presidents to come in. That model was then copied to Sing Sing and Greenhaven Prison. Folks, in those facilities mentored me. And I just, those were tools and lessons that I brought with me to California, to LA, and to UCLA back in 2015. And there's just been a groundswell of support because LA is ground zero for mass incarceration in the U.S., right? As far as cities go, this is the place that locks up more people than any other city jail system. So it's just been a blessing to work with and collaborate with folks like Claudia to make it happen, because I'm a New Yorker. I'm from Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying? But to be able to work with folks who have been doing organizing work here on the ground, who know this area, who are part of the area, who, are a part of the culture here, and just to figure out how we can put our heads together, that's been a beautiful thing. And so I've fallen in love with with LA, and I will always be a New Yorker, but I have a love for both coasts in a way that I think defies some of the stereotypes that folks try to perpetrate about, having to choose one or the other.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. You touched on a couple of different things, and I think we are in that, that historical moment where these changes can kind of be, brought out. And I was thinking that it should be bipartisan in a way, because what you're doing is the public safety. Yeah. People use public safety as this catch-all phrase to attack, people of color, right? This happens to be a correlation between that. But if we're really talking about public safety, education, people who are educated, right? That's their pathway not to, for recidivism to drop. So we're in a historical moment where really that message should appeal, to so many of the constituents in America, that I hope that's what happens. But if not, regardless of the fact, to capitalize on this particular momentum, what you're doing it's amazing. So I want to ask, you touched on it, and if you could flesh that out a little bit more, and then also opening it for Claudia for her reason as well, is what is your why for doing this work?
Go ahead, Bryonn.
Oh, no, he might have broken up, but I'm pretty sure he said Claudia.
He said you first, and then for me to jump in.
Anybody could jump in first. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't just for Bryonn, but Claudia as well. That what is the why, right? Because We're talking about a lot of things that are related, but what is the why?
Yeah.
What motivates you? Why are you doing this?
Thank you for clarifying. And Claudia, will you help me kind of challenge the patriarchal assumptions that men should somehow speak, more than women by allowing me to fall back and let you drive the direction of the conversation?
Sure. The why. I can give you a personal answer. The why I do the work. I was partly raised in Central America and El Salvador during the Civil War, which was a civil war that had everything to do with disparities, economic disparity, access to resources, etc. So at a very young age, even though I'd already been exposed to a lot of poverty and racism and sexism and patriarchy as a child in San Francisco, being raised in the Viz Valley district, seeing it in El Salvador in the format of a war, and coming face to face with soldiers and AK-47s in our faces, it just didn't really allow me to think about anything else but what am I going to do to improve the material conditions around me? And what's my role in attempting to make the world, or at least this sliver of the world, better for the next generation? Because I think it's incumbent upon all of us to think about improvement in some way. And I don't think that only can be done through activism or advocacy, although I think those are incredibly important things to do. I think organizing work is essential, but it's not for everyone. So sometimes people's, their additions or their what they bring to the table looks very different than activism or advocacy, but it is part of the conversation. It is part of the collaboration. That's all I got to say about that right now.
Yeah, so I definitely, a lot of Claudia's experience resonates with me because I've lived in New York most of my life, but I also lived in Panama as a kid and was there when General Manuel Noriega was still in power. And so there were times definitely where, school got cut short because it was shooting in the streets, and we saw the military police with the AKs, and, that experience stands out in my mind. But then also like going to the park in New York City, and like at a time where you go to the park and there's like crack vials all over the ground, being a child of the drug war in a certain way, makes that's part of my reality as well. But I think being the child of immigrants from Trinidad, my parents came here, my mom in 69, my dad in 71. And they came from this country with less than 2 million people in it, with these dreams of opportunity and freedom and equality and liberty and, all of the American PR machine puts out into the world about what happens here. And, I don't think they ever imagined that they would see a time in this country where this country put more human beings in cages than the entire population of the country they were leaving, And so seeing that change during my lifetime, and that rude awakening, as the eldest child of immigrants, where they invested so much in me, with hopes of, seeing those opportunities come to bear. That shaped my own consciousness and the disparity between what they had been fed about what this country was about and my experiences on the streets, being thrown in jail while I was a law student, and seeing that what I was reading in my case books wasn't matching what I was experiencing on the streets of New York City. That contrast, forced me to speak up about these things not working together, And so that's been a part of it. And then I've also just had mentors. I've had elders who, I can't even, I've been so blessed to have people like Lonnie Guinier, Brother Kellis Parker, first black law professor at Ivy League Law School at Columbia, take me under his wing, mentored me alongside Dave Chappelle and Ben Jealous and, Harry Belafonte, to be mentored by somebody who was mentored by Paul Robeson. I mean, it's just like, I've been so fortunate to have folks who could kind of guide me and point me in the direction and say, look, if if all you have your sights set on is the house on the hill, and you're not thinking about how the entire community that makes you who you are can have a path towards liberation, you are headed towards a very unfulfilling fate. And so that's been programmed into me from a young age, and I'm grateful for it.
It's interesting because I think of just what we're all talking about. We're all immigrants or born from parents who are immigrants. And obviously everyone is unless you're native. And I think about the impact, right, on the immigration piece as well. And I think about incarceration. I mean, I just think of everything that's in this room right now. And I'm wondering for both of you, how has collaboration been healing? You both have talked about so much in terms of the relational piece and mentors. So I'm wondering how it's been healing for each of you personally.
Yeah, collaboration requires trust. You have to trust the folks that you're working with and building with. And in order to build trust, usually it incorporates some level of vulnerability or sharing vulnerability. I think if you can do that and be safe and feel safe about it, that results in healing. Healing for me means that you are reconnected back to your core, right? Like that, the person or that the wholeness that you feel that you felt before any traumas or pains came into your life. And so healing is, your ability to get reconnected to that core, which I think collaboration allows for because it reminds all of us how we're meant to proceed in this world, which is in community with one another. And then, of course, you can build from there, right? And the healing continues.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And yeah, Bryonn?
No, I was just going to say, because Claudia is an expert on trauma and healing, she's so much cheaper than the average therapist. You know what I'm saying? So I just call her up, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm going through problems and whatnot. I'm like, oh, Lord have mercy. Therapy is not cheap. It costs money. You know what I'm saying? You end up broke if you ain't got insurance. So Claudia is like, it's just an easier way. So I was like, let me be really close to her, befriend her, get up under her wing. And then, you know what I'm saying? I could call her as I'm going through whatnot, because sitting in that chair paying a therapist, and we need therapy. Black folks, there's a whole thing in the black community of if you go see a therapist, you go get, you might be crazy. No, if you're not getting therapy, you probably on your way to being crazy. We need therapy. We do, because all of us are carrying all kinds of trauma with us. And if we don't come to terms with it in some way, I mean, it takes a toll, and it's like you pay now or you pay later. So, Thankfully, like I said, Claudia got all them degrees and, she's an expert on it, so I could holler at her and be like, can I sit in the chair and just tell you all my problems? And she's like, all right, cool, no problem. So that's one of the benefits of that collaboration. Collaborate with people who can actually, support you as you're going through processing your trauma because, it's necessary. It's absolutely critical.
100%. I mean, and I think it goes back to the relational, we're wired for connection. And then I think about how, this nation is focused on individualism, right? And capitalism and always getting above the next person. So I think what you both are doing in so much of this work is dismantling a lot of the individualist piece. Because healing happens in collaboration. It happens in community. It's liberating to know that you're not alone. So I'm wondering, what has healing looked like from the United States for both of you as we talk about immigration, incarceration, the individual focus? What has healing looked like for both of you?
You're first this time.
So is your question more about what does it mean to heal in the United States because of our particular location in this country, given its history and social and political context? Is that
exactly?
Is that what your question is getting at?
But also healing from the state, right? Not just in the state, but from it.
Yes, healing from the state that has been all about violence, really. Violence with Black and Brown communities the most. And I'm Jewish and I have, my pigment is white and I can assimilate, right? So it's going to be different. I'm not looking over my shoulder and I'm not afraid when I get stopped by a cop when I'm driving. So
You're not.
What does that look like? Sorry?
You should be afraid.
I should be afraid. I'm not as afraid, probably, but yeah, my heart does drop.
Yeah, a poet I love says in a piece of his, there's a reason Black people are not the number one target audience of extreme sports, right? I don't need the bungee jump to get my adrenaline flowing. Every time I see the blue and red lights, my pulse starts increasing, my heart rate increases, right? I don't need to go skydiving. God bless you if you do. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to jump off no cliffs. I don't need to go swim with the piranhas. I know Claudia's a scuba diver and whatnot, but I personally do not need to find new ways to put my life at risk, right? So a Black person dies every 28 hours, according to the Malcolm X grassroots movement study in 2012 and 2013, Operation Ghetto Storm. Every 28 hours at the hands of law enforcement. So the people who, we're told are supposed to be serving and protecting are, out there trying to break our neck. All right, we know that's because they come from slave catchers. They evolved out of slave catchers and defending white property and not Black lives. But the reality is, if you truly are concerned about healing, you have to first acknowledge and recognize that there's a wound, right? Malcolm X said, you stab me in the back, stick the knife in 9 inches. If you pull it out 6 inches, am I supposed to say thank you, right? You still got 3 inches to go. And you haven't even acknowledged that there is a wound. So that's one of the major problems with this country, not recognizing its history of racial and gender violence that are at the core of its origin. It's because this country's genocide and slavery, stolen land and stolen labor that made it a superpower on the world stage. And without the recognition of that, we continue to throw salt on these wounds without fully thinking about taking the knife out and recognizing that we are suffering because of this history of violence. So I think that's an important step. After World War II, right, there were Nuremberg trials in Germany. After the end of apartheid in South Africa, the alleged end, because it's still going on in so many ways, but there were truth and reconciliation trials in South Africa, right? We've seen these tribunals and trials to actually have countries address what's going on. In the Netherlands, they're looking at reparations, right? In different parts of the United States, they're finally having a conversation, but there's not been a whole-scale effort to really deal with. We propose reparations every year, but we've not as a country. This country has not dealt with its history of racial and gender violence, and that is why we cannot be shocked when every other week there's a school shooting, because violence is in the DNA of the country, and there's not been a serious effort to deal with what that means for folks to be walking around with historical violence, with intergenerational violence, intergenerational trauma, to be carrying that with us without dealing with the fact that these wounds are real and lasting and have an impact on us. Until that happens, true healing on a mass scale cannot happen.
Word. Go ahead, Bryonn.
I learned that from Claudia.
I think healing from the United States also requires for us to like tap into memory, right? Because we all come from lineages from around the globe where we functioned in a more healthy way, in a way that had a deeper relationship with the earth and the land, and that was more focused on communal or collective living. This project or this experiment of hyper individualism is recent. Humans have existed for thousands of years before this recent experiment. And so just tapping into the things that we know from generations ago and bringing those to the forefront, not in a like go back to the past sort of way, because there's innovation that exists now that I think is good, that should continue to exist, but bringing those practices to bear. We're seeing that a lot now in Southern California, where lots of folks, actually the pandemic resulted in a lot of people getting into gardening and growing food. But in Southern California, we'd seen an increase in it even before the pandemic in community gardens and such. And it's a lot of folks of color that are getting into it, right? Especially Black people in South LA. And just the idea of working in the land and planting things and growing stuff, that heals. It heals not only us, not only our neighbors, our families, our communities, our neighborhoods, but also heals the land. And those kinds of things, I think, are a big deal in terms of being able to get to a place where we can feel some sort of harmony. And I don't mean harmony like in the corny way, but harmony in terms of equilibrium, and being able to exist in a way that recognizes our place in the collective, right? Our place in the fabric of humanity, but also acknowledges our own individual value or the power that we bring as, a particular human being that is unique, because each one of us is one of a kind. And the last thing I want to say about healing from the United States is, as Bryonn said, reparations are so necessary. And before we get there, we need to be honest and tell the truth. So I do think that there is a lot that needs to happen on the state, state acknowledgement of pain that's been caused as a result of state policies or state positions. And we think about this a lot at Four Freedoms in terms of civic engagement, where for centuries, lots of us have actually been denied the ability to civically engage, whether because of gender or race, national origin, religion, whatever it is. The state actually said, no, we don't want to hear from you. Your voice is not included. Or whether it's, because you've been incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. And then people want to say, oh, folks are apathetic. They don't care. They don't come vote. They're not civically engaged, when it's the direct result of what the state has been doing for a long time. So some acknowledgement of that, I think, is really important, so that folks can get to the point where they can heal, because they're being gaslit.
Yes.
In the meantime.
Yeah, 100%. Just look at all the policies now of not providing hydration, water, or food to folks who are standing in line to vote.
Yeah, and that will be something that is banned because folks got their butts kicked.
Yep.
And the fact that folks who are incarcerated currently can't vote is ridiculous. The lie that prisons are supposed to be about rehabilitation needs to be exposed. Because if they were, and you really wanted people to be productive citizens once they leave, or productive members of their community once they leave, you would give them the opportunity to vote while we're incarcerated.
There are 2 states in the United States where people can vote while they're incarcerated, and that's Maine and Vermont. And it's no surprise that those states are hella white and that they have some of the larger white populations in prisons than other states. So that just goes to show, that I've always said that incarceration is the greatest voter suppression project that this nation has ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, Claudia, you brought up a salient point with that civic engagement. And when it's specifically designed, for people not to be engaged like that, then people say, okay, we don't want it. You don't want us. We don't want you. And that causes all sorts of other problems, right? And so that acknowledgement needs to be there. But also the work of what you're doing, right? To put the spotlight on this, and also work for ways for people to become more civically engaged. And I was wondering, so how do you see, and you've touched on it, but how do you see community healing as political? So I know there's this collaboration piece, right, which can actually lead to community healing. But just to tie that in, like how do you see it as political
I mean, beyond the idea that everything is political. Yeah, I mean, I think that when we engage in political work or advocacy, it's always about healing for the community, right? Because people are just trying to get to the point where they have access, where they're seen, where their needs are met, where they're incorporated as valuable folks. And so looking at it from that perspective, community healing is always going to be political because as communities heal and as they do that work, it's engagement. And if you're engaged in your community, that's political work inherently. Political work isn't always about candidates or elections, although it is. It's part and parcel to the political process. But politics is just the way a society is organized, right? So if we're thinking about putting things in place so that folks can reconnect to their core, that's about how society is organized.
I got to echo that. The brilliant scholar Robert Kelly writes about, working at McDonald's in the 70s. And like part of his development, his like Black working class consciousness was, finding ways to like rebel, even in that system. And so it wasn't about just joining the NAACP or joining, the Congress for Racial Equality. If you want to do that, go do it. That's great. It's important to be part of organizations. But some of the most important work of changing systems happens in these spaces that are often, kind of underlooked, underrecognized, right? And I think, whether it was sabotaging machines or, pouring extra milkshakes so the folks who are underpaid could use some of the consumption as a way to kind of compensate for the fact that they were underpaid, even though we know that that was probably doing their bodies more harm than good. But taking longer breaks, all of these ways of resisting and rebelling and challenging the system that happen in all these spaces are really important to recognize as political as well, right? And a part of the important part of us sort of finding ways to say, look, this is unjust and unfair, and I'm not going to stand for it. Whatever way that I can, I'm going to challenge an inhumane system because I demand my humanity and my dignity be respected.
I like that a lot. So for anybody else listening, I'm sure they like it as well. And so what action steps can us listeners begin to take if we would like to get involved with restorative justice, trauma-informed lawyering?
And your UCLA project as well. The prison education.
Claudia got a whole list.
But they're asking also about the prison.
Claudia got a whole list ready. Let them know. Let them know, Claudia. I know you get that list ready. Hit them. Go ahead. You got it. Do your thing.
All right. Around transformative and restorative.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll answer the restorative and transformative justice question, and then Bryonn can answer about prison education program at UCLA. So in order to promote the practices of restorative and transformative justice, people should recognize that it's a paradigm shift that requires all of us, not just in thinking about ending mass incarceration, which is part of it, but it's also about the way that we interpersonally engage with each other, the way that we think about punishment, the way we address conflict, the ways in which we allow empathy and compassion to be the principles, the guiding principles in how we react or how we interact with each other. So that recognition is really important. And then there's books that people can read. The latest book on it is We Do This Till We Free Us, which is Miriam Kaba's book. I often refer to her as the godmother of restorative and transformative justice. It's a really excellent book that people should pick up. Also, Fumbling Towards Repair is a great workbook that people should work through as a group, or if you don't have time to join a group, go ahead and do it on your own. You'll still be in collaboration with everybody else that's doing it because at some point it'll come up in conversation. And then Emergent Strategies by Adrienne Maree Brown. Notice there's a trend here. There's a lot of Black women who have written these books because it's generally Black women who trailblaze on the ways in which we should be organizing our society. So those three books, I think, are good starts. It's also worth it to do an internet search for whatever groups might exist in your own areas. The Bay Area has the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective, I think, and in Los Angeles, I'm part of a group. We purposely don't have a name yet, but I'm part of a group of people who study together and practice and offer resources, and then, of course, do processes together. But it doesn't require anybody to have any particular professional training. You don't have to come from a specific discipline. Anybody who wants to become a restorative or transformative justice practitioner can do so. You just got to find the folks in your area that are also interested in doing it in start small, because at its core, RJ and TJ work should be hyper local.
Everything Claudia said is on point. So I'm totally with that. I would say, as a poet, as a writer, as an artist, I would say language is also important. And if you, for folks who want to really act in solidarity with the movement to end mass incarceration, to abolish the prison industrial complex, I would say thinking about language is an important piece of it. The Center for New Leadership, a group started by formerly incarcerated professionals from every profession, from law to medicine, started this campaign inspired by other movements for queer rights and language that's appropriate for queer folks, immigrants' rights. And so using language that focuses on our humanity, our personhood, like throwing away words that lock us into the worst experience of our lives, whether it was a mistake or it was a state putting us in that situation, not using their language, calling people felons, convicts, even prisoners and inmates, but using languages that emphasizes and focuses on humanity, our personhood. Incarcerated people, formerly incarcerated people. This is something that incarcerated people have actually generated in terms of the language that will be more humane. So you know that my incarceration experience does not define my existence or my identity as a human being, my understanding. So that's one thing folks can do. You can look for the language letter from the Center for New Leadership online. Specifically for the prison education program at UCLA, the website has multiple ways to get involved. The website is prisoneduprogram.ucla.edu. I'll say that again, prisoneduprogram.ucla.edu. And there are a number of initiatives that folks can get involved with. I would also recommend Abolition Democracy, Angela Davis's book, powerful piece. Her lectures on liberation are also powerful. Arundhati Roy's War Talk. Folks know her for her award-winning novel, but they should also check out her essays, her critical essays as well as the other scholars like Sarah Haley, right, whose book No Mercy is an important book, especially focusing on incarcerated women. Kelly Ladder Hernandez, The City of Inmates, focusing on the history of mass incarceration in LA, really highlighting the incarceration of Native and indigenous folks as a precursor to even the incarceration of enslaved African folks, right? And really painting the picture how genocide and slavery go hand in hand. So those are all texts I think are important. You know, New Jim Crow has gotten a lot of attention over the recent years. I prefer Mumia Abu-Jamal's The Classroom and the Cell. But I think they both have their merits. Ava DuVernay's film 13th is an important piece. And I think to augment it, to cover some things that it doesn't address quite accurately or sufficiently, I should say, Ruthie Gilmore's Geographies of Racial Capitalism. Those are all powerful resources. And I think, join an organization or organize your own study groups, work groups to actually go through the material and to begin talking about how to take these ideas and take them into practice. Che Guevara, the Cuban revolutionary, the Argentinian Cuban revolutionary, said that what we have to think about is, for protracted engagement in revolutionary practice, we have to think about both theory and practice. We might not just run around doing things, right? We need to think about what we're doing, have a strategy for what we're doing, build it on strategies that have been effective, apply those strategies, innovate those strategies to our current moment. And that is how we will have longevity in the work that we do. So those are some of the folks that I would recommend, and some of the resources I think folks, might be useful for folks, because they've certainly been useful for me.
Wow. Okay, number one, thank you so much. I was able to catch up with all of them, and we will be sending out a newsletter when your episode airs with all of those resources. I look forward to all of us being back in LA together. I hope that we can just chill for hours somewhere in LA. And before we go, I'm wondering what it's been like for both of you to tell your story today.
Fun? Bryonn?
Like an acai bowl with all the toppings.
Oh, that is the best description I've ever heard.
No surprise that the best description comes from a poet.
Thank you for the coconut.
I hope I'm the coconut. both of you. I mean, you're both poetic. I mean, it is poetic justice how you both speak about healing and collaboration. And yeah, I'm so grateful on a Sunday morning that you gave time and labor of all of this. And yeah, I look forward to like this being the beginning of the four of us maybe hanging out together.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Thanks for
appreciate having this opportunity to be able to interview with you and hear your ideas and all that you're involved with. Because they're not just ideas, they're actual work you're doing. And I know that I'm going to be waiting for this resource list in the newsletter to come out as well, because you drop so many names and so many different things. I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds interesting. So I'm looking forward to exploring all that stuff that you mentioned.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks for having us.
Thank you both.
Thanks.
Acai. That's going to be our plan. When we're all together, let's do acai. Thank you both so much.
Love it. Y'all be well.
All
Be
right.
safe
Thank
and
you.
healthy,
Peace and
everyone.
blessings.
Take care.
We'd like to thank our listeners, and special thanks to Arts in Action, part of USC Visions and Voices, the Arts and Humanities Initiative, for their generous support. Arts in Action, part of USC Visions and Voices, plants seeds for positive social change by activating intensive art projects between community partners, students, and faculty. Today's episode is written and produced by Susie Hess and Yehuda Price. Today's music is co-written and produced by Yehuda Price, utilizing a contraband cell phone while in prison. Our Stories Matter is brought to you by Trauma Informed LA. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Our Stories Matter, and our website at traumainformedla.org. Please give us 5 stars on iTunes so more folks can have access and donate to traumainformedla.org so we can keep recording and healing through our storytelling episodes.
Life is the life we live. Modern day slavery pursuing cheddar. Life is the life we live. Whips and chains trying to duck the 12th letter.
Mamas tell us be good, obey master. Don't be like daddy, all in the hood, okay, bastard.